He smirked at the wall, reading as if grief were a game he had already won. My name is Marin Calder, and the room smelled like lemon polish and old paper. The conference table was long enough to keep us apart without effort. My Uncle Brent lounged at the far end, jacket undone, fingers splayed across his stomach like a satisfied cat. The others clustered around him, nieces and cousins tilting toward his gravity. The window showed a steely afternoon, the kind that looks clean and somehow empty. I folded my hands in my lap and counted my breaths. Granddad Walter had died 10 days earlier, quietly at home. I had been there the week before, changing the light bulb in his hallway and bringing him pear slices on a blue plate. He liked the plate because it had a chip shaped like Florida. He called me my father's girl, which in our family was not always a compliment. My father left young and early, chasing a better job and a different kind of truth. He did not find either. I learned to keep my tone level when people teased me about it. The lawyer, Mr. Ames, was a patient man with a thin mouth. He held a folder with its brass fastener slightly bent, which bothered me more than it should. Every small wrong felt louder today. He adjusted his glasses and said we would begin once all parties were seated. We were already seated. He seemed to need a few more minutes to not cry. I respected that. Brent tapped the table with one knuckle. No need to draw this out, he said. Walter was a man of order. He said Walter like a mechanic says an engine model. I stared at the knuckle, pale against the dark wood, then at the hand resting near it. Hands tell stories long before words do. His had the expensive looseness of someone who rarely lifted anything heavier than a corkscrew. Our family liked to pretend we were intact, but places showed. I carried groceries to Granddad's house and made sure the porch light worked. Others appeared on holidays and failed to notice the missing steps. Love does not check in only at milestones, he told me once, while we lifted a crate of old chisels together. I kept those words folded inside me, like a bill you hide in your shoe. Mr. Ames cleared his throat. I tried to keep my spine long. I could feel Brent's eyes resting on me, amused the way people are amused by a cat that turns up at the door during rain. I wore a navy dress that didn't look expensive and flats that would not squeak. My hair was smoothed back because I wanted no stray pieces to irritate me. I wanted nothing to distract me. Thank you for coming, Mr. Ames said. Walter respected punctuality. He used Granddad's first name too. It had the same clinical tone everyone used in this office. He set a sealed envelope beside the main folder and placed one steady hand over both. He also respected clarity. Brent smiled with the lips only. We all do, he said. I looked at the seal. It was heavy paper, clean wax, the color of dried cherries. I recognized the way it had been pressed. It looked like the stamp I had seen in Granddad's desk drawer the last time I dusted. The drawer had otherwise been tidy. The stamp had been sitting on a folded dish towel, waiting for something it had not yet touched. A quiet voice in me made a small movement then, like a bird shifting on a branch before it lifts. It was not certainty, not quite. It was a recognition that the ground had texture. Calm is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to sit next to it and keep your hands still. Mr. Ames lifted the first document. Paper touched paper with a soft sigh. Somewhere far away, a siren passed, fading down the block. In the brief silence that followed, I let myself breathe a little deeper and knew the afternoon would not behave the way my uncle expected. Grief rearranges a house. It turns familiar corners into angles that snare you when you pass. After the funeral, relatives moved through Granddad's rooms like tourists in a museum, pointing without caring about the dust. They spoke about heirlooms, then made jokes to soften the words. I stayed late each night, emptying the kettle and folding blankets, putting chairs back where they belonged. Brent did not help. He stood in doorways and judged. He liked to tell the nurse that Walter would have preferred a private clinic, then smile at me as if I had stolen something. The nurse ignored him. She had a face that held more weather than any one day could explain. When she left for the last time, she squeezed my shoulder and said, "He liked the pears." I nodded because I could not speak. The family group chat excluded me months ago, after an argument about a broken clock. It seemed polite at the time, cleaner to remove a problem than keep reading my careful replies. People call it setting boundaries when they mean building fences. I learned to stop pressing my face against the boards. I learned to bring coffee to Granddad's shop out back, sit on the stool with the gouge marks, and listen to the hum between the walls. He taught me to sand with slow circles, tight and patient, never pressing, letting the grit do the work. You can't force a board to be what it isn't, he said. You can only learn the grain. I thought of that while Brent wandered the house with a phone held like a badge. He catalogued things for an imaginary museum, sounding generous while measuring value. I slept poorly. The second night after the funeral, I found myself standing in the kitchen, hands on the counter, looking at the chip in the blue pear plate. I missed the sound of his slippers on linoleum. I missed his habit of saying good night like he was lending it to me for a while. The house returned whatever I put into it. If I offered quiet, it offered quiet back. At the viewing, I heard two cousins whisper that I was expecting something. They meant money, but their voices carried another tone, soft with condescension. I wished people could hear the words I did not say. They would sound like small nails setting a frame, precise and true. I do not crave wealth. I crave fairness that lives in the same room as love. Those two are cousins who understand each other without speaking. On the morning of the reading, a heavy sky sat over the city. I chose the navy dress again. I ate toast I could not taste. Before leaving, I stood on the back steps and looked at the workshop. The door still sagged slightly where the hinge had warped in summer. I had meant to fix it and never did. Regret arrives like a stray cat, insistent and calm. Today, I closed the door carefully and promised it I would come back. The law office waited with its tidy lobby and slow elevator. A receptionist with perfect nails asked for my name twice, as if one syllable offended the room. I watched Brent arrive in a suit that spoke more loudly than his voice. He winked at the receptionist as if she were part of his victory. Inside the conference room, chairs scraped, papers shuffled, and grief put on a tie. I sat at the near end of the table this time, and placed my phone face down. My hands rested on my knees. They were steady. People assume steadiness means surrender. It does not. It is the glass over a photograph, protecting what matters from careless fingers. I felt the first edge of a vow then, thin as thread, strong as wire. I would not let this day define Walter's kindness with numbers. I would not trade quiet for silence. Whatever came out of those envelopes, I would meet it without apology. If fairness arrived, I would greet it with both palms. If it did not, I would build something with the wood I already had. The meeting began and paused, began again, a series of paper tides. Mr. Ames read the primary will first. It was dated nearly a year ago and divided the estate along familiar lines. Brent's shoulders lifted as if a weight he wore in public had suddenly grown feathers. He glanced at me, the smirk a private joke told to his own reflection. Then Mr. Ames touched the sealed envelope. "There is a later document," he said. His voice changed slightly, leaning toward care. He broke the wax and slid out a single folded page with a stamp in the corner. The stamp was the one from the dish towel in Granddad's drawer. It felt like a small hand on my back. Before he read, the door opened. A young woman entered, hair pulled into a low knot, suit all edges and resolve. She apologized with a nod and took a seat near the window. "I'm Hannah Patel," she said. "Associate." The word landed like a bridge between people who had been stranded on separate banks. Brent checked his watch, annoyed at the interruption. Mr. Ames read the codicil with slow care. It named me as the trustee of a workshop fund, created from the sale of one rental property and a portion of the cash accounts. The fund's purpose was written in Walter's plain words. It would maintain the shop, offer apprenticeships to local teenagers, and keep his tools working in hands that needed to build. The codicil also requested a review of certain transfers made in the last 6 months. He used the word review when he meant suspicion, because he was never cruel, even on paper. Brent made a sound that wanted to be a laugh but arrived as a cough. "This is absurd," he said. "Walter was not in his right mind last week. He looked at me as if I were the weather. She put him up to this." Hannah's posture sharpened. "The codicil is properly witnessed," she said. "I was one of them." Her voice was clear and light, like a good chisel hitting clean wood. Nurse Gladys was another. And Mrs. Romero from across the street. She opened a thin laptop and turned it toward Mr. Ames, who adjusted his glasses. "We also have a video record of Walter stating his intent, kept to 2 minutes for clarity." No one moved while the screen glowed. Walter's face filled it, older than I wanted, eyes bright as sound. He said my name like he always did, a steady anchor. He spoke about hands, about grain, about wanting a place where the town's rough edges could meet purpose. He said the word trust in a way that pointed at both the legal document and the feeling. Then he looked off camera and asked if I would be embarrassed by his hair. Someone laughed, and the video ended. Brent stared at the table. He was confused, he said, softer now, trying another path. Hannah took a breath. "There's also the matter of the transfers," she said carefully. "Walter asked us to review payment logs related to property taxes and repair vendors. We found invoices paid to an entity called Equerry Holdings, registered at your business address." She lifted her eyes to Brent's. "We traced 2 payments totaling $48,000, categorized as roofing and some repair at the Maple Street duplex. The building's roof was replaced 3 years ago, by a different vendor." She slid a printed bank statement across the table. The account numbers were blacked except for the ends, which spoke clearly enough. Mr. Ames nodded once. "We will pursue a civil remedy if needed," he said. He kept his eyes on the paper because it was kinder. Silence stretched, thin and taut. In it, I found a small memory, Granddad's hands guiding mine along a board, showing me the lazy curve where the grain changed direction. "You stop here," he had said, "and turn the work, not the blade. Moving against the grain only shreds the surface. You never win by forcing." Hannah closed the laptop and looked at me. It was not a smile. It was acknowledgement. The ally you meet in a fight you never wanted is the one you remember when you wash your hands afterward. I placed my palms flat on the table. I did not speak. Resolve does not need a microphone. It only needs a quiet room and a plan that fits your hands. We reconvened in the same room after a short break that felt like a long one. The city had shifted slightly outside, the light sharpening into something that made edges honest. Brent returned with a face reset to confidence, but his mouth had a new tightness, as if a tooth were bothering him and he refused to admit it. Mr. Ames summarized. He spoke like a judge whose job was not to burn, only to illuminate. "The codicil stands," he said. "The workshop fund will be established immediately, under Marin's trusteeship. Questions about the transfers will be handled separately." He placed a blank pen near Brent's elbow, a courtesy from a man who collects them without noticing. Brent stared at the pen as if it had insulted him. "You are all very theatrical," he said, looking around the table. "A secret video, a last-minute amendment, a tearful niece." Walter did not think this way. I kept my voice small and even. "He thought practically," I said. He built things that lasted longer than arguments. He frowned at the word built. You fix chairs, Marin, he said. That isn't an enterprise. Hannah shifted slightly. A trust is an enterprise, she said. So is training, so is repair. Value lives in use. She folded her hands. Mr. Calder, you will receive your distribution as outlined in the original will. The codicil adjusts only specific items, and adds oversight to past transactions. No one is taking your house. The old tight smile tried to return to his face and failed. Don't talk down to me, he said. I have run numbers for 3 decades. Then you'll respect clear columns, Mr. Ames said. He slid another document forward. Here is the mutual agreement for an independent audit of estate expenses for the last year. If you decline, we petition. If you sign, we proceed without that cost. His eyes found me again, as if the entire building had narrowed to a single point. You want applause, he said. You want me to admit you won. I want the shop doors to swing smoothly, I said. That's all. There was an odd relief in those words. The room found a lower gear. Somewhere down the hall, a copier started and stopped. Hannah passed Brent the audit agreement. He held it like it might stain his fingers, then signed with 4 hard strokes. The pen squeaked. He pushed the paper back, and with it, the performance he liked more than any object. Trustee, he said, aiming the word at me like a dart. I nodded once. Caretaker, I answered. I preferred the word and would choose it every time. The rest moved quickly. Mr. Ames detailed the process steps for forming the fund, transferring tools as in-kind gifts, and appointing 2 community members to an advisory board. Hannah took notes that looked like small ladders. Mr. Ames scheduled a visit to the workshop for a simple inventory. He asked if there was coffee nearby. Grief and justice both drink it black. As we stood, Brent lingered near the window. The city was blue and silver, traffic threading through it like stitches pulling a wound together. He spoke without turning. He told me once the shop wasn't a museum, he said. I told him people don't pay to watch kids sand wood. The sentence hung between us. He looked back and I saw something suddenly human. You were wrong about one part, I said gently. People don't pay to watch. But they do pay to hire hands that learned patience. I picked up my bag. We had both occupied the same house of grief, but in different rooms. Some doors open, some don't. We left without slamming anything. The elevator hummed like a thoughtful bee. At the ground floor, Hannah paused. You kept your spine, she said. That is rarer than signatures. I thanked her. She handed me a slim folder and told me to call if anything felt heavy. Heavy things can be carried, she added, just not alone. Outside, the air had turned clear. A bus hissed, children crossed slowly, and someone laughed, sharp and bright, around the corner. Justice had no trumpet. It sat beside me in the quiet, folded like a clean shirt, waiting to be worn without announcement. Morning arrived with a softer light than I expected. The house exhaled. Dust motes drifted in the workshop like tiny planets doing what they have always done. I opened the sagging door and put a wedge under it until I could replace the hinge. Tea steamed in a chipped mug that had belonged to Granddad's friend, the one who taught him to make dovetail joints without saying the word perfect. He liked the phrase true enough. We inventoried the tools that week. Mr. Ames came in a sweater with elbows that knew desks well. Hannah brought pastries and a habit of choosing the paper first, then the politics. She worked efficiently, asking me to name each tool aloud, as if speaking them made them belong. Smoother, spokeshave, mallet, block plane, rip saw. Saying the names felt like reciting a family tree without the bitterness. We painted the back wall a fresh white. We unhooked the brittle extension cords and coiled them like asleep snakes. I fixed the door hinge, slow and careful, checking the pilot holes twice before driving the screws. The door swung without scrape. I kept swinging it for a while, smiling at the ordinary grace. 2 weeks later, we held the first open workshop. 5 teenagers arrived, all elbows and guarded eyes. One wore headphones around his neck like armor. Another traced the grain on a scrap like reading a map. I showed them how to square an edge. They listened because the wood did. The room's hum changed. I felt Walter's approval in the way the light fell across the bench, a warm stripe that brought attention rather than heat. Brent did not come. I did not expect him. He sent an email through Mr. Ames agreeing to the auditor's requests. The numbers were numbers, tidy and complete, and led to a meeting with stern words and a repayment schedule. No one used the word punishment. We used the word correction. It fit better in the mouth and did a cleaner job in the world. The fund grew modestly. The workshop steadied. I kept small rituals. I wiped the bench at closing each day. I hung the blue plate above the doorway where the light caught the chip and turned it to a bright crescent. On Fridays, I cut pears into even slices and set them on a napkin. The teenagers laughed at the offering until they tasted them. Then they asked for more. Sweetness makes a better argument than speeches. On a Wednesday near dusk, I found a square envelope in the shop mailbox. Inside was a photo of Walter in the shop, dated last year, his hands on a half-finished stool. On the back, a note in Brent's handwriting said, "I forgot he looked like this when he was happy." The sentence was careful, like someone testing a floorboard they once fell through. I stood there a long time, the walls holding the quiet the way a good jar holds light. When the first apprentice finished a small table, he asked me if it was good enough. I had him run his hand flat across the surface and listen with his palm. "It doesn't catch," he said, surprised. He grinned without trying to hide it. I nodded. "Then it's ready," I said. Ready is what doesn't catch. In the cool of evening, I walked home through a neighborhood that smelled like bread and damp sidewalks. The sky cut into a soft blue seam. People watered gardens. A child rode a bike with training wheels and the careful pride of someone learning to balance. I felt the shape of the day settle inside me. Justice had not sung. It had sat with me while I worked, an honest companion that left the room better than it found it. At the door, I paused and looked back at the workshop. The hinge was holding. The world does not always reward quiet, but it remembers it. The smirk at the wool reading could have become a ghost that rattled every plate in the cupboard. Instead, it became a small, completed thing, like a not-sanded flush, still visible if you look, no longer snagging anyone's shirt. I turned off the porch light and went inside. The house felt less rearranged now, more itself. I put the photo on the mantel and set the blue plate against it. I thought of Walter saying goodnight like alone and decided I would return it, in pieces, as mornings lit the floor and teenagers learned patience one clean pass at a time. Peace is not a prize. It is a practice, repeated until the hands remember it without thinking. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below. And subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.